little ones, the Sleep Manual Podcast. Welcome to our podcast, The Sleep Manual. I'm Nikki, and I'm here with my Little Ones co-founder, Amanda.
Hi.
At Little Ones, we help families around the world with their baby and toddlers' sleep challenges. Everything from terrible night sleep to poor naps, to unsettled babies, to night weaning, self-settling sleep regressions, toilet training, you name it. If you do need a hand, visit us at www.little1s.co, and we would love to guide you through your current sleep challenges. On our podcast today, we are going to explore the famous 4-month sleep regression.
Yes, the big sleep regression you've probably all heard about. In this episode, we're going to explore what is the 4-month sleep regression, the signs of the 4-month sleep regression, ways through the regression, and we'll recap everything at the end because there's a lot to discuss.
Yeah, there is a lot. It's a big one. It's a huge period for your little one's sleep. It's a huge change. So if your little one is really anywhere over 8 weeks, 8 weeks old, then this is definitely going to apply to you, and you'll want to stay tuned because it can be a new type of hell otherwise.
What is the 4-month sleep regression? This is where your baby's sleep has matured from the newborn, sleepy, drifting between sleep cycles to sleeping more like an adult. And this is a permanent change. I think this is where people think, this is probably where it's named incorrectly. It's not just a regression as such. This is a permanent change. So unlike the 8-week regression and the 12-month regression, where they are just short periods of unsettled,
disrupted sleep.
Disrupted sleep. This is a permanent change. So what actually happens here is your baby's sleep matures to the point where they are waking completely in between their sleep cycles. Those sleep cycles are 35 to 45 minutes during the day and 2 hours at night. This is where they will wake fully rather than, as I said before, the drifting between sleep cycles when they are a newborn. Now, how this becomes a significant milestone and permanent change is where the way that your baby goes to sleep at the beginning of their naps and the beginning of their nighttime sleep directly affects how long they'll sleep. Because if they are being rocked to sleep, or if they are being fed to sleep, they will still go to sleep, and that's fine. But when they wake in between those sleep cycles, if that rocking has disappeared or if that feeding has disappeared, they will wake and not know how to go back to sleep, because they do need to sleep longer. In most cases, it's not just going to be a 45-minute nap. And so they need to learn how to be able to go back to sleep. And the only way they're going to learn how to go back to sleep is to learn how to go to sleep in the first place. And whether that rocking or feeding is removed gradually, then this is the way that you would have to teach them.
The thing about this, we're going to call it a sleep regression, even though Amanda's just explained why it's technically not a regression, but that's what its title is out there in the big wide world. So we're going to call it the regression. The thing about it is that this doesn't go away. So it's not one of those things that you can just go, I'm just going to wait it out and it will get better. It actually will probably get worse, because having a 4-month-old baby that you have to rock to sleep every 2 hours all night long is not as bad as having an 11-month-old or a 12 or an 18-month-old baby that you have to rock to sleep every 2 hours all night long. This regression is really closely tied to having positive sleep associations and great sleep habits, which we'll talk more about later on when we talk about how to survive this sleep regression and how to sail through it. But the key thing to remember is that it is a permanent change. Your little one's sleep has massively changed since when they were a newborn, and they were just drifting between those sleep cycles. And like Amanda said, they're now waking completely. Going to sleep is going to become a real big deal. It's becoming really important now. Let's move on to how we know if your little one is in the throes of the 4-month sleep regression, because it's not like they wake up the day that they turn 4 months old and then suddenly it happens. It can be a bit of a gradual onset, and it can happen really any time around 3 months, even just before 3 months.
Of
It can
mine-
happen around 5 months.
One of my babies actually started showing signs around 9 weeks. This is definitely closer to the 3-month side, obviously. But it is, as Nikki said, a gradual change. There might be still days where they aren't showing all the signs, and they might not ever show all the signs of the sleep regression. They might just show a couple.
So if we're talking about what signs to look out for, Amanda's sort of briefly discussed the key ones, and that is that your little one will suddenly start only napping for one sleep cycle, which is 35 to 45 minutes during the day, and they will probably start waking in between all of those nighttime cycles too, which can be every 2 hours, even 1.5 to 2 hours all night long.
But this might actually only happen after midnight because your baby's so exhausted from the day, only sleeping these short little cat naps, that they do actually sleep all right until midnight, and then it's after then. So that's a bit of a key as well. It's not just all night long from when they go to bed, after midnight.
So you might be in the boat where your newborn baby was actually starting to sleep quite well, and maybe starting towards 3 months old, they were doing some really good stretches of night sleep, like maybe you were getting 6 hours in a stretch at night, and they were having some really good naps during the day, and you're probably thinking, yes, I'm out of the woods. This is their sleep settling down. They're starting to sleep really well. I've totally nailed it. And then all of a sudden, it's starting to get a whole lot worse again. That is a key sign of the sleep regression. Or maybe you're one of the poor people whose their newborn was never a good sleeper. And there are a number of reasons for that. And we have an entire podcast about why your newborn isn't sleeping. And then you might not necessarily notice that the 4-month regression behavior has crept in because they've just continued to sleep badly. But in that case, if your little one is around this age, then it's safe to say that their bad newborn sleep has just evolved into bad 4-month regression sleep. Some other things that you will probably notice is your little one is a lot grumpier. There is a huge change that's happening in their brain. And they're obviously going to start having a bit less sleep if they're going to be doing this frequent waking. So they're going to be grumpier. They're going to be a bit more unsettled.
Clingier, if they're grumpy.
Yeah, clingier. People often, Amanda, don't we find at this age, people go, oh, my baby started teething. Because they're waking a lot more at night, and they're grumpy and they're unsettled. And we're like, oh, can you see teeth? No, I can't see. Then they're not teething.
And a lot of times, and this happened to one of my friends who is a dentist, she was like, oh, my baby's teething, blah, blah, blah. And it was the 4-month sleep regression. She did understand eventually it was because her kids didn't get teeth until they were 1. She was like, I'm a dentist and my kids don't have teeth. What has happened? She had ended up x-raying them to check they even had teeth.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so they definitely are not teething. There is no moving up and down in the gums. That's once the teeth come through, they just come through.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. But yeah, definitely at this age too, your baby's going through a bunch of other physiological developmental stuff, which looks like teething. They start shoving everything into their mouths. They start drooling a lot more. And that, coupled with the crap sleep that can happen at this age, so often we have people say, oh, my baby's just teething, that's why their sleep is bad. And just a quick diversion on the teething point, like we were just saying, teething is really only bad when you can literally see the tooth bursting through the gum, because that is where the pain is. It's not sore when the tooth is inside the gum. It's sore when it's breaking the skin, and that's like a day, and then it will be through. And those of you who have already had children will know that it is a day, roughly, maybe 2. You see it very clearly, and then it's over. So there's no way your little one is teething, but they haven't actually got any teeth coming through for like 2 months non-stop.
And we know this from our older children who still are getting teeth, but they can tell us for a couple of days before that tooth has come through, oh, my gum's really sore. This is also because they're chewing on their gums, whereas babies are not actually chewing food on their gums when they're teething generally. So they'll tell us for a couple of days, my gums are really sore, and then what do you know, the tooth is through.
My 12-year-old she still gets teeth, and she's getting one of her molars at the moment, and it's coming up quite high, which is what her teeth tend to do. They come out and then they come down, and it's so gross. I hate that kind of thing. But you can see it so clearly. She goes, "Look, Mum," and it's the gum goes translucent. Yeah. You can see the tooth right there, and then it starts to slowly come through. So if your baby's 3, 4, even 5 months old, and you're seeing these signs, but you're not seeing an actual tooth, I promise you it's the sleep regression, and you cannot wait it out.
No.
It's not going to go away. So let's move on and talk about then how these poor parents can survive the sleep regression, because if it doesn't go away, what chance do we have?
So, as Nikki said, it's a permanent change. And the key to this whole regression, and literally the only key, is that your baby needs to learn to be able to go to sleep in the way that they're then going to resettle themselves. They need to be able to self-settle. They need to have associations such as a lovey or a sleeping bag or white noise, all of those sorts of associations of learning how to go to sleep in their sleeping space of where they're going to sleep. So if you are teaching your baby to settle themselves to sleep, or you may be settling them, you may already be patting them, for example, to sleep, but actively you are having to do something in their cot or their bassinet, that patting will need to be reduced, and then obviously you're left with your baby being able to be put into their bed and go to sleep by themselves. Because when they then wake, they know, oh, you know what? I'm still tired, I'm going to go back to sleep.
Yeah, they think, I don't need to call out to Mum or Dad to come and do that thing to get me back to sleep in between my sleep cycles, because they know how to do it. So the reason I think a lot of people fall into this trap, I suppose you could call it, is, as newborn babies, it's pretty easy to, and we want to, rock our babies to sleep, and we feed them to sleep, and they'll generally fall asleep if we do anything to settle them. And as we were saying, that's not necessarily affecting the length of their sleeps at that age. Even if your 3-month-old baby is being rocked to sleep, they might still be sleeping quite well. And so we just think that this is going to continue, and that the older they get, the better their sleep's going to get. But so then you're still there rocking your baby or patting your baby or feeding your baby to sleep. And now suddenly that has actually become the only way they know how to go to sleep. And when this regression happens, like Amanda said, that's also the only way they know how to go back to sleep. Quite simply, we just have to look at reducing your input in your little one's ability to fall asleep. Because if they can fall asleep by themselves at the start of their naps and at the start of bedtime, then in theory they can do that between all of these sleep cycles. And that is the goal. And that's a skill that will last your little one's entire childhood. This is going to be crucial when they're a toddler. This is going to be crucial when they're 5 and 6 and 7, because otherwise you will be rocking your 7-year-old to sleep every night.
Yeah, and that's just not physically possible. But this is where people end up, I guess, co-sleeping with their baby and then toddler and then child, because that's how they're rocking, or like getting them to go to sleep, rather than teaching them how to go to sleep in their bed, in their safe space. And of course, like with all the safe sleep, we have to get them to go to sleep in their beds. Co-sleeping, unfortunately, is not safe. Teaching your baby to sleep in their bed is just going to be really, like, it's the only way through this regression. And when you are teaching them to go to sleep during this regression, it doesn't just happen overnight. So you will get a few days where they'll go to sleep independently. Once they can go to sleep, they will go to sleep independently. And then you might end up with a couple of days where they all of a sudden they can't. They just don't understand what's going on anymore. Remember, you are teaching your baby how to go to sleep. You are just like you're going to teach them how to brush their teeth or how to brush their hair. You are teaching
ride
them
a bike or
ride a bike. Yeah, exactly. So we do have to persevere. Once you've started teaching them, it can take about a month, I would say, to actually be able to then, and it will just all of a sudden become easier, and you'll be like, oh, I haven't had to settle my baby in their bed for a couple of days. You'll put them in their bed and they'll go off to sleep, and that should be after about a month or so. So around 5 months or 6 months, you will end up having a baby that you can literally just walk into their bed, put them in their bed and walk away, and they will go to sleep. And then they will sleep much better at night and much better during the day.
So we actually have an entire podcast about self-settling, which is what this is called, your little one being able to settle themselves to sleep. So if you're interested in finding out the methods that you would use and how you would go about teaching this skill to your little one, make sure you have a listen of that podcast, because it has all of the information and the methods and the do this but don't do this in there. Because self-settling goes hand in hand with the 4-month sleep regression. And as we keep reiterating, if your little one cannot self-settle when they start to go through this regression, just waiting it out is not going to resolve that. And in actual fact, it's going to reinforce your little one's current sleep habits. And then suddenly you've got an older baby who is still technically going through the 4-month sleep regression because they haven't learned the skills they need to actually come out of it yet. So the other thing that we need to make sure that we're looking at this age, and this does have an impact on this regression type behavior, is your little one's daytime routine and their sleep schedule. Yeah. Because again, I think a lot of people get caught with their babies at this age still in a fairly newborn sleep routine. So I think we just don't think that we need to be constantly changing and tweaking our babies' sleep routines as rapidly as they themselves are growing. And so often at this age, and this is in itself contributes to catnapping and night waking, is a situation where your little one is having too short awake windows. You're still aiming for awake windows that are quite newborn in length. I'm talking like 1.5 hours. Or maybe your baby, by some miracle, is having too many naps during the day, or maybe those naps just aren't at the right times. And all of this is going to definitely have an impact on their ability to sleep longer than one sleep cycle, even if they can.
And it ends up meaning that you as the parent fall into the trap of then having to actively settle your baby to sleep. And then, as Nikki said, that reinforces those sleep associations of this is how to go to sleep, by being rocked, being patted, being pushed in the stroller, going to sleep in the car. So if you are almost not forcing your baby to go to sleep, but if you're
having to settle them to sleep because they won't go to sleep.
That's right. If you're having to settle them to go to sleep, then that is the problem with enforcing these sleep associations. Whereas if your baby is ready and perfectly ready to go to sleep, they will be much easier to settle. They will be much easier to teach how to go to sleep in their beds because they're calm, they're not overtired, they're not undertired, they haven't had too much sleep during the day, or they haven't had enough sleep, which is sometimes the case as well, where they're overtired. Yeah, having those sleep patterns, we cannot stress enough how having the perfect sleep patterns during the day and naps during the day affects absolutely everything. It affects your night sleep. It affects your settling ability. It affects how long your naps are. It affects everybody as well, because it affects their moods if you don't know what's going on, and it affects our mood. It's hard.
Yeah, it is hard. But if you do need a hand, and it's also hard to know. It's hard to know, especially as a first-time parent. You don't really even know what's around the corner in terms of a baby's sleep, let alone what they should be doing today. So if you do need a hand getting all those naps and awake times and everything happening as they should for your baby's age, make sure you visit us. Our website is www.littlenones.co and or download our app from app stores, because through our sleep programs, we literally have this information in minuscule detail.
Yeah.
Sort
Down
of
to the
minute
2
by
weeks.
minute, of your baby's day and night, right from birth.
Yeah.
If that's something you think you need a hand with, and to be honest, why wouldn't you, if you could make it easier on yourselves? Because, as Amanda's stressed, the sleep regression's one thing, but there's all these other contributing factors that are not going to make it any easier. And actually another thing that I'll talk about, which we talk about a lot, is the environment in which your little one is sleeping. So I'm talking about their nursery or your bedroom if they're still sleeping in your bedroom with you. You just want to do everything you can because sleep is hard at this age. So you want to do everything you can to make it that much easier. So doing things like having a really dark room for day naps as well as night sleep is only going to help your baby. Using white noise is only going to help your baby to sleep. If your baby's around 4 months, then they're probably weaning out of or needing to come out of a swaddle anyway. So moving into a baby sleeping bag or a sleep sack is also a positive sleep association. So making sure that you can take all of these steps, and these are quick wins. These are things that you can implement or change immediately, and you will see improvements with your little one's sleep. It's only going to help. Should we talk about pacifiers a bit, Amanda? Because
that's probably a sleep association that we don't really associate with the 4-month sleep regression. But it definitely is.
It's a problem at this age.
Yeah, so pacifiers or dummies, if you have been using them, I know a lot of people do, it is literally stopping
especially
your baby from crying. And
a leftover of newborn sleep association.
Yeah, so getting your baby to go to sleep via sucking is one of the strongest associations that they can have. It can be a fantastic way of getting your newborn to go to sleep. And at the 4-month sleep regression, though, if they are having that pacifier for every time they go to sleep, then that is what they need to resettle. You will end up having to go in and do dummy runs or pacifier runs at 2, 4, 6 every 2 hours at night, and they'll potentially end up catnapping during the day. So the way I did this with my first child, who did have a dummy, my second did not, but my first, the way I did it was I would, during the 4-month sleep regression, get her to go to sleep without the dummy. And if for some reason she didn't go to sleep by herself without the dummy, then I would put the dummy in and use it as a settling technique. And that way she has learnt how to still self-settle without the dummy. But I was using it instead of having to pat her to go to sleep
as
or
a
something.
backup.
As backup, yeah. So then she was still able to roll in between those sleep cycles because she could self-settle. Now, after about 7-8 months, this is where the dummy or pacifier, you would start teaching them to, or if your baby still has one at this point.
Or if you want to introduce it at this point.
Yeah, if you want to introduce it at this point, this is where you would teach your baby to put their pacifier in themselves. Rather than you putting it in, you would maybe add it or have it attached to a comforter or a lovey, and you would teach your baby to reach for that lovey and find the pacifier and put it in themselves. And then, of course, the sleep regression at this point, once your baby can put it in themselves, this is now a baby-controlled sleep association.
That is
rather than a
self-settling.
parent. That is self-settling. So between the 4 and 8 months, if you do have a baby that uses a pacifier or a dummy, you need to make a couple of choices. You either use the dummy as a resettling tool, because it can work fantastically. Still teach them how to self-settle. But as I said, use it as a backup or to resettle. Like during that 4-month sleep regression, when they are still learning, I would sometimes go in if she did wake up during a lunch nap, for example, and if she wouldn't go back to sleep after a few minutes or 5 minutes or so or 10 minutes or so, I would then put the dummy in and she would go back to sleep. But of course, my baby was still going to sleep at first by
On her own.
self-settling. You either make that decision and use the dummy to act pacifier to just resettle, or you take the dummy away altogether, or the last choice is, are you going to be prepared to do dummy runs or pacifier runs every 2 hours at night and catnap
During the
day
day
until they are 8 months and can do it
and
themselves.
that would be a hard no for me.
Yeah. So those are the choices if you've got a pacifier.
The other thing about a pacifier, though, especially once they're old enough to learn putting it back in themselves, if you are trying to move away from a feed to sleep association, so if your little one has the sleep association, if the only way they know to go to sleep is you feeding them to sleep, and that could be breast or bottle, then the easiest way to break that, and as I said, we've got a lot of methods for self-settling in our self-settling podcast, but the easiest way to break that one is to replace the breast or the bottle with a pacifier. So they're still having the sucking that they associate with falling asleep, as long as they're at the age where they can replace it themselves, or you're actually achieving nothing. But pacifiers can be a fantastic tool in your sleep toolbox, but they can also be a big hindrance. So you've got to get the timing right.
Yeah, and just one more point on the pacifiers. Some babies, if the pacifier falls out before that sort of 10-minute mark, then they will wake up. So if you've got one of these babies that doesn't actually do a full sleep cycle,
then send it back.
Then go chop the pacifier in half and choose something else.
Yeah. I think we've covered most of the big topics to do with the sleep regression, Amanda. We've talked about why it happens. So it is a permanent change in your little one's sleep patterns, which means that they start to sleep a lot more like our older children, or like we do, where they're completely waking between sleep cycles during the day and overnight. So those are the key signs that you would look out for, is those shorter cat naps and the more frequent night waking at the end of every nighttime sleep cycle. And we've also discussed how really the only way to survive this period in your little one's sleep is to teach them to self-settle, while also making sure that their naps are age appropriate. You're taking steps in their sleep environment, looking at whether the pacifier might be an issue if you're using one. But self-settling is the key, and it's going to save you months and months and maybe years of hassle and stress and no sleep.
Yeah, I think this is a big one, and it's so polarizing. On everyone's got an opinion on it, but we've helped hundreds of thousands of people. Like, we do actually know what we're talking about here.
Yes, we do.
We're not just making this up. Yeah, the key is self-settling, and unfortunately that is really the only way through.
And we just need to reiterate as well, it's not going to happen overnight. Have some patience with your baby. You're both learning something new. You're both changing habits and patterns, and some patience and understanding.
And this might be the first thing you've actually had to teach your baby something.
Yeah.
And this is just going to be, this is parenting. You do have to teach them. So,
but you will get there, and it will happen. And like Amanda said, one day you will just go, oh, look, they're doing it and it's awesome. And we've all been there and we survived somehow. And you will get there. And if you need any more help, we are always here for you.
So thanks for being here with us today as we discuss that huge topic of the 4-month sleep regression. Make sure you check out our other podcasts for tons more sleep advice. And if you head to our website at www.littlenones.co, we have loads of more information there. And of course, any of the app stores has our app as well if you need any further help with your little one's sleep. Thanks for being with us today. We'll see you in the next episode.
This is Little Ones, the Sleep Manual Podcast.